Y'all, welcome back to Bankedoutt Radio Show, music and business talk. Every single business owner is being bombarded with a tech marketing hype telling them to let AI run their company. But what happens when your brand loses its heartbeat? Our guest today has been building artificial intelligence since long before it became a trending buzzword. Dr. Arshavir Blackwell holds a PhD in cognitive science and brings over 30 years of raw frontline tech experience to the table. He is an elite strategist who helps creators and founders leverage advanced machine learning without losing their unique, sovereign human voice. Dr. Blackwell, welcome to the platform.
Thank you very much. It's great to be here.
So, there was a couple of videos I was watching as in preparation for this interview that you did.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And one of the things I wanted to get into is understanding like AI, how consumers use it. So like, GPT, Google Gemini, or from my understanding, like the frontier of AI. And
Yes,
then
those are the frontier models. That's right.
you also have what you call the local model,
Yes.
which is running the application basically on your own particular device. Can you give us a little more brief explanation of what that is?
Sure. So frontier models are the ones that everybody probably, for the most part, is using. And those are things like Claude, ChatGPT, Gemini, and so forth. Those are all running in the cloud. And the advantages of them are they're very powerful, of course, as we all know. The disadvantages of them are well, first of all, they get to be expensive. If you use them a lot, you notice that you're burning through a lot of tokens, and that can add up very quickly.
Mm-hmm.
The other disadvantage, well, there's actually two other disadvantages. One is it's not secure. So you can't really expect that whatever you're going to send out over the wire is going to be preserved and secure and safe. They could very well use what you're sending them for training for their own material. And of
Mm-hmm.
course, people can intercept along the way, and there's other security concerns as well. The other thing that a frontier model cannot do is it can't really speak in your own voice. And the reason for that is because you can't really, they're trained already, they come pre-trained.
Mm-hmm.
And
When I worked with a local business in Macon, Georgia, we took their operational revenue from 45K to 88K in a single year. How? We didn't chase social media clout. We found hidden billing programs, cut cash-based operational leaks, and fixed their pricing structures. Most independent creators, bookkeepers, and estheticians are amazing at their craft, but they run their back ends like an expensive charity. They carry uncollected fees and think customers will just appear out of nowhere. Don't let operational blindness kill your vision. The worksheets inside my guide will help you audit your company structure in 48 hours. Grab your copy right now for $19.99. Tap here to buy the ebook.
I mean, that's in the name, right? So because of that, there's really no way, there are no levers that you can use to really change what the nature of the output is, other than what you put in the prompt. And what we find is that the prompt is really not a very good way to do that. So you can give it instructions about what you want it to sound like in the prompt. But what happens very often is you get a costume. So you don't get genuine sounding, authentic changes. You get a sort of performative version where it just sounds very fake and it sounds like it's kind of trying to put on whatever tone you've asked it to do, but it really can't do that. Now, what I work with are what are called local large language models, and they're
Mm-hmm.
local because you can run them either on your own computer or we run them also on a dedicated server, but one that's not connected to frontier models, one that's not connected to ChatGPT. And you can actually train those on your own material. And those are not in their responses performative, because when you train it on your own material, you're not training it through the prompt, you're actually changing the nature of the learning in the model. And so what we do is we can actually have it read, let's say you have a blog or a Substack or, a bunch of marketing material. it actually reads through all of that and retrains itself to speak in your voice. And the advantage of that is that you don't have to spend a lot of time on ChatGPT or on Claude having it write something and then having you have to rewrite it. I mean, it kind of misses the whole point when you have to do that. So that's basically what we're working with here is a local model that's safe. It's much cheaper because you're not burning up tokens on some huge frontier model. And it's trained on your own voice. So it sounds like you.
How long would it take to be able to do that, to train it for your own voice? Like how much material would you have to input into it?
Yeah. So the training time is maybe 10 minutes, 15 minutes max. It's not very long. And you only have to do that the first time you use it. And then after that, it's already trained. The more information it has, so let's say you have a large size blog, it would certainly be enough. If you have a lot of emails that you've written, so they're all in your own voice, that would be enough. With mine, I train it on about 50,000 words, and it does pretty well. And that would be that's not huge, but that's kind of the size of maybe a medium-sized blog or, mixed in there with perhaps marketing documents that you've got or some other material. So it doesn't have to be just one thing. Now, if you want it to be in a particular style, everything that's written in it. So if you're doing marketing for a certain product, you shouldn't mix it in with your blog about cooking or something like that. Those should be two separate ones. But you can actually get a pretty good result with a relatively small amount of information trained relatively quickly.
So here's, you've been in this space for 30 years.
Yeah.
How are people using it wrong nowadays, especially when it comes to small business owners?
Well, I've been doing this since before it was called AI. Back when I first started doing it, we called it neural networks. And that's essentially what we're calling AI now, is basically just a very, very sophisticated neural network. I started at UCSD, and I was very, very fortunate to work with two of the pioneers in the field of neural networks. Elizabeth Bates, who was a linguist who did a lot of work in understanding how humans process language, but how a neural network could do it as well. And then her colleague, Jeff Ellman, who was also someone who did a lot of the real pioneering works with neural networks and artificial intelligence. What was happening back then that's contrasted with now, and what's really changed, is the models were much smaller, and the designs for the models were small, but also the computers that we were running them on were much less powerful than these huge data centers that we have access to today. I mean, orders and orders of magnitude difference. So what happened was about, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, there was a sort of revolution that came about as a confluence of new algorithms, more powerful kinds of computers to run them on, parallel algorithms, parallel computers. And that's where we've gotten to today. Now, the thing is that I hope that a lot of businesses are at least dabbling in or getting used to using things like ChatGPT and Claude, because these are very, very powerful tools. And you can do, I mean, literally, I'm able to do weeks worth of work in a few hours. So if you get to know them well, it can really, as a small business owner, it can really be a huge benefit. But the problem that we see is very often people have businesses, and there are studies to show this, when these systems are implemented and when they fail, a big problem is that businesses don't integrate the AI workflow into the rest of their work. So the AI becomes sort of this thing over there that is bolted on, I guess you could say, to the workflow. And people are copying, pasting from that back to their regular workflow and then back to the AI system, and so on and so forth. And so because of that, a lot of people really just kind of give up on using it because they don't really understand the power of it and they don't understand how to integrate it into their work. So I would say as a small business person, my first suggestion would be really like use this stuff so that you really feel comfortable with it. But second of all, you need to figure out how to integrate it into your ongoing workflow and not throw it at the people that are doing the work and just say, good luck, here we go. Just
Hmm.
do what you can with it. People sort of need to be led to the right ways and the right use cases and the proper ways to integrate AI into their workflow. And that's a lot of work in and of itself.
Yeah, I definitely get that because I would say that like one of the things I use AI for is with my podcasting and my show notes.
Yeah,
So what I do after every single interview, I'll write a paragraph or two of what we discussed, and
right,
then I have AI like, match it or I put it into the prompt and tell it to like, based off the information I'm feeding it, to write me
right.
a good description to where when I post it on YouTube and also like Podpage, it's able to be scoured by the internet. So
Yeah,
therefore, those keywords and all that start to show up and they're used in that language.
yeah,
Therefore, the search engine, and I've seen that with my videos, they've been crawling higher and higher on Google search engines.
right. So you're using the AI basically to phrase things in a way that search engine optimization is going to pick up on,
Hmm.
it
Yes.
sounds like. And that's a very good use of it. And I think that people are beginning to figure out how to integrate SEO, search engine optimization, with techniques like ChatGPT or local models or whatever it is they're using. So that's actually a great. I mean, have you found it to be, it sounds like you found it to be successful. You're getting more hits on your
Mhm.
podcasts and it's working for you.
Yeah. Um, I don't like, some people like even with like the thumbnails and stuff, I upload pictures and things of that nature
Yeah.
instead of trying to get it to create something just from typing in prompts.
Yeah.
And the artwork looks way better than a lot of people. So for example, people who use it to, let's say they have a small business and they deal with food. Well, they're
Yeah.
using a lot of AI generated food looking stuff. And I'm like, your cooking stuff doesn't even look like that. So a lot of people are rejecting those type of
Yeah.
flyers and
Yeah.
thumbnails and stuff.
That's a problem, and there is a big issue, and I read a lot about this because it's out there, but also it's actually a topic I'm interested in. It's very interesting because there's some people that feel as though AI is great and a blessing and it's going to do a lot for us. But there's also a very active school of thought out there that is to greater and lesser degrees against using AI in these various business processes. Some of those are as simple as what you're talking about, like, oh, the picture looks like it's AI slop. That's the term people always use, AI slop. And real food doesn't really look like that. Now, there are ways to use AI in a way that you don't get AI slop. And the one thing that I think is really important, and I always tell people, is don't just take what the AI gives you and throw it out there. What you need to do is you need to test and check every single thing that it tells you because AI can be wrong and people don't
Mhm.
realize that. One thing that AI is very good at is producing very slick, nice, what I call fluent looking output. So it
Mhm.
looks really right. And I've written an article about this called Fluency is Validity. And the risk is that when something looks really right, looks well written, looks like it's arguing well, people very often, which is what AI is very strong at doing, people very often accept that at face value and don't
Mhm.
necessarily dive into what the actual argument is and whether it has merit or not. So AI can take the most ridiculous sounding idea and make it sound very believable because that's what it's kind of programmed to do. It's programmed to continue to engage you. It's programmed to make you think that what you're talking about is the greatest idea in the world. We call
Mhm.
this sycophancy. And that's something that people have to guard against in any field, whether it's business or academia or whatever they're using it for. And there are a whole bunch of techniques that you can use and that people, I think, need to be more aware of, that are actually good techniques when you're just dealing with media in general.
Mhm.
So not even just AI, but also just ways to verify and validate when you read an article, whether it's generated by AI or whether it's generated by a human being or some combination thereof. You need to check and verify every single thing in there and not take it for face value. And I think that that's kind of the key to keeping a lot of this technology useful, but not harming people.
Yeah, one of the things I discovered was like truth mode
Yeah,
and telling it to give me truthful answers that are based off of data and not
right.
like you said, talk to me like, oh, your ideas are great and now that's why this was work, especially when it comes
Yeah,
to marketing, because I think a lot of times we're misled, like you said,
yes,
into believing that it sounds good.
right.
But what's the old saying? If it sounds too good to be true, it's not.
It probably is. Yeah. So I'm curious so when you use truth mode, what do you do exactly? How does that work for you?
So me with creative ideas and also marketing driven data. So for instance, I'll give this example. I was asking about small businesses, especially in particular to like how small businesses are look at marketing and advertising, investing in their company. It was telling me like, what percentage of small businesses are using like, AI and running
Right.
with marketing strategies and stuff like that. And then I wanted to go even to more of a subsection of like, okay, so now Black owned businesses, do they use marketing? And it was like, yeah, they rely on this and that and all this stuff. And then I was going back and forth with it because I was telling it based on my experience of, doing marketing for 20 years and working a lot with Black owned businesses. The ones I run across, and of course, you can't group everybody together because everybody's business is different.
Right.
But generally speaking, if they fall within, let's say, that I like to call the infancy stage or whatever, 0 years to just getting started to about 3 or 4 years.
Right.
There's not negative connotation when it comes to wanting to spend money on marketing and thinking that they could just do everything for free, basically on social media, not get
Yeah.
somebody's a third party's perspective on how they should brand their business in order to attract the clients and understand that it's a process with the like a sales funnel and all that. And when
Right.
I, was getting information from AI, I was like, just basically trying to give me like data, but in truth mode, I was like, no, this has not been the experiences I've had. I've actually have a lot of people who actually run from it because they're fearful and they also have like a trauma associated with doing this because they will have an experience with maybe somebody and they'll have that bad experience. So then they group everybody else who could help them with their business within marketing in the same, they'll put them in the same like monolithic group.
Right.
And it's harder to like get that sale, the next person who comes behind someone who ever gave someone a bad experience.
Right. So they
And then it's,
overgeneralize from one
yeah, it
bad apple.
did. And then, when I was going back and forth with AI with that, we came to a consensus like, no, you're right. That, this isn't, uh, everyone doesn't just look at stuff from this, I guess, generic point of view.
Yeah.
So it was very interesting. And then I always ask it, are you still in truth mode? Because I don't like to take them out of truth mode because I won't, when I have ideas, especially creative ideas, and how will this idea, what's I guess, the probability of it doing well in the marketplace?
Yeah.
I want something that's based off of data and what other people have done that's probably similar to it. And not something that's just going to agree with me. If it doesn't, if it's a bad idea, just tell me it's a bad idea.
Right. And that's the problem is a lot of times. So do you find when you put it in truth mode, is it actually truthful?
I've had some things that really appear to be truthful.
Uh-huh.
Of course, like you said, it can make some mistakes. But I think I use AI differently than a lot of other people because I'm going back and forth with it until I know based off of my experience and education and what I've been able to do and what would more than likely be the outcome if this particular strategy was implemented as opposed to, just
Right,
taking everything at face value,
right.
like he says. So I don't know if I don't know a lot of people will go back and forth with it like I
Yeah.
do.
So you're saying most people just type something in and get something out, and then they run with that, and you
Hmm.
basically have a dialogue with it.
I do every single time I'm having
Yeah, yeah.
dialogue with it because
That's
I
the way to
found that
do
to
it.
be very helpful.
Exactly. Because that's the thing is that's an aspect of it, of AI, that I think that a lot of people aren't really using. And that's what I do as well. So many people just say, oh, I'm going to type something in. It's like a search engine. It's going to give me an answer and I'll just
Hmm.
paste that in. But actually, it can be much more useful as a thought partner.
Hmm.
And so to do exactly the kinds of things you're doing, where you're saying, oh, here's an idea I had. What are the good aspects of it? But what are tell me some of the reasons maybe this isn't a good idea. And then
Hmm.
have it give you its response. And then you say, but what about this? What about that? What about the other thing? And a good AI system can help to expose a lot of the assumptions in a lot of the ideas that you're working through. But you're not going to get that if you just type in a single prompt and get a response and paste it in. And I think that's where a lot of the value of AI is being left on the table.
Hmm.
People are using it the way you're using it, which is really the right way to use it, which is as an interactive partner and not as the final say of whatever it is you're trying to do. And so I would say my other suggestion to business owners would be to do exactly what you're doing, which is great, which is to not think of it as an oracle that's going to give you a final answer, but rather think of it as a thinking partner that you can bounce ideas off of. And maybe it will come up with new ideas that you haven't come up with, but you still need to evaluate and decide if those ideas are actually as good as it seems to think they are. So that's the direction I'd like to see people leading into.
So what do you say when people, they use AI and I've seen headlines in media where they're talking about like the loss of jobs and things of that nature, and it seems
Yeah.
more of a scare tactic than an educational piece of information.
Well, I mean, when you have any new technology, historically speaking, what's happened is there's been a loss of jobs, but there hasn't been a loss of employment, because what happens is that the new technology shifts and creates all sorts of new work for people to do that didn't exist before. And very often that work is actually a lot more interesting than what people were doing before. So at one time you had rooms full of people with those electronic calculators doing banking business, for example, and putting things in folders and in filing cabinets. And then when the computer came along and all of that became automated, those people didn't have a job anymore, but they were still able to to be supervising the computers or supervising the work of the bank in some way or another, or
Mhm.
often different jobs. And so far, every single technological advancement has actually led to an increase in employment overall. Now, I mean, admittedly, there's disruption because people need to learn new skills.
Mhm.
They need to learn, they may need to retool. Sometimes, if someone's been in the workforce for a while, they may be so used to doing what they're doing that it's a burden for them to learn this set of new skills. So I'm not saying that it's without some degree of cost, but I don't think there's a risk of AI taking over and nobody having any work anymore and everyone being out of a job, because again, there's always going to be some things it can't do that humans do better.
So with creative industries, I know that there's been a disruption, let's say people who design flyers and stuff like that, because a lot of people
Yeah.
use AI to design flyers.
Yep.
And then they say that, photography and videography work. I don't necessarily believe that because I don't see any AI walking around here actually shooting stuff.
Right.
And regardless of how much people shoot and upload, everyone's eye is just different. You're going to capture
Yeah.
something different. What do you
Yeah.
say to people like that as far as it disrupting those industries and they feeling that, within X amount of years, AI can either take over or substantially cut those jobs out?
I mean, I think it's a very good possibility, again, that there are certain job categories. If you're talking about flyers being handed out, I mean, already we have the internet, which has made using the mail and putting flyers in the mail obsolete for many, many years now.
Hmm.
And but again, let's take a look at what happened. So department stores and catalog sales suffered, but what you have now is this huge online booming internet economy.
Hmm.
So it's not it's and there's lots of jobs there. And so what you have is not that people aren't buying anything anymore. It's just that they're buying it in a different way. And I
Hmm.
think that that'll be true for a lot of these things. They may not be consuming items in the same way. The items may be produced differently. Some of them may be, in fact, produced by AI. But then, let's say the photographer, for example, um, that's going to free that photographer up to do other, probably more creative work than what they were doing. And I think that's a net positive. So, someone who is just taking pictures of oranges, and now you don't need to do that because if you want to advertise oranges, you just have AI generate a picture of an orange. Well, those
Hmm.
people may be out of a job taking those pictures, but there's a whole range of creative opportunities that they can get into that AI is not going to immediately replace. And I think that's going to be much more the pattern of what you see with AI than everybody being thrown out of work.
So with it increasing efficiency, like you said, you're able to do work that would normally take longer, maybe days at a
Yeah.
time, and you compact it into 2 hours.
Oh,
Do you,
absolutely.
do you think that employers or just industries in general will require more productivity?
I think they will, and I think that's happening already. But productivity gains because of technology are not anything new. I mean, if you think about again back to those people with the hand calculators in the back room of the bank grinding away, once you got computers in the picture there, the productivity per individual went up amazingly high because though you didn't have to have the bottleneck of an individual grinding through a column of numbers for a period of time. So I think that the the question is going to be sort of where do those productivity gains get who benefits from them?
Hmm.
So if you get a person who suddenly is 10x more productive, is
Hmm.
that going to be reflected in their paycheck? Is that going to be reflected in some other aspect of their compensation? Or are they just going to be expected to continue working as hard as they've been doing at the same salary? And that's a discussion I think that we need to have because I think there is something to be said for there being a sort of technology dividend.
Hmm.
So, in other words, that all of us should benefit somehow from this new technology, as opposed to just the people at the very top running the companies. And what that benefit should be, I don't know, but there should be some way. And this was something that was very big in the 50s that unfortunately never really came to pass. I mean, in the 50s, automation, we were all going to be pressing a button and cooking dinner. And so we would all be out playing tennis or golf or swimming. And then, we come in from our 2-hour work week, like in the Jetsons.
Hmm.
And that never really came to pass for a variety of reasons. But I think that's much more, that's less a technology issue and more a social issue. So that's more about how do we want to choose to allocate those resources that we've suddenly freed up by having all of this work done by machines? And, for example, right now, I mean, a big question is happening with Amazon drivers. they're considered to be uh, basically not full-time employees, but contractors. And
Mm-hmm.
there's a move afoot to make it so that they're treated as full-time employees of Amazon, just like anyone else working at Amazon, which would increase their benefits.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the kind of, and of course, Amazon's against that. They don't want to pay the money, but that's the kind of tension I think that's going to have to be resolved. And we're going to have a national coming together moment to figure out how to equitably divide up this dividend so it's not just all going to a bunch of people at the top.
No, I definitely agree with that. 'Cause I think a lot of people at the top, they get enough anyway. So why not share the wealth?
Yeah, they're getting a lot already. And the problem is that the system is kind of set up to allow them to continue
Mm-hmm.
that process of getting a lot and getting more. And I don't know what kind of downward pressure is going to come about to make it so that there's more of a general distribution. We're not talking about a redistribution of wealth. I'm just talking about if a company is able to perform 10x better, then that should, I think, be reflected. Now, maybe you make the employees stockholders or something like that. And so then the value of their stock goes up. I mean, I don't know what the solution is, but I think that there definitely needs to be a way to make sure that this sudden boost in productive capability is spread more evenly than it seems to be right now, which is, to me, that's just basic fairness.
Yeah, which I definitely agree with that. I have a question. I was looking at a different interview, and y'all were talking about, I believe, like the European Union in 2027 is going to form compliance with AI, if I'm not
Yes,
mistaken.
yes.
So my question is, well, it could be a two-part question. One, in doing something like that, I don't know if they're doing this. Are they looking to like experts like you to actually help draw the diplomacy of compliance? And then also, who gets to set the rules for compliance? Because
Yeah.
if people are using AI, like you said, in just generality, the wrong way, or don't understand how sophisticated it is, how can a body of people decide it it's complicity?
Right. Exactly. Well, the EU is actually already getting pretty involved in AI, much more so than the United States. For one thing, they now require watermarking. So anytime you generate something using AI, there's sort of a hidden code in the way the words are arranged that doesn't affect the output, but that is supposed to be, at least supposedly, detectable as having come from AI. And that's something that comes from the EU. Now, what's coming up in 2027, really, no one really knows what's going to
Mhm.
happen. This is a group of politicians and probably some European technologists, but AI does not really have the strong presence in Europe that it does in the United States. So I'm not sure where they're getting their technologists from. But
Mhm.
right now, a lot of what's happening is that a lot of companies kind of know that sometime next year they're going to have to start complying if they want to work in the EU. But everything is really up in the air as far as what exactly that is going to mean. I mean, is it going to mean having a third party that goes through a checklist of things to make sure that the AI that you're using has proper guardrails and is safe, and that they actually certify that and they sign their names to it, kind of like a banking examiner? Or is it going to mean something different? And at this point, we really don't know. I wouldn't be hugely surprised if it doesn't get kicked down the road, to 2028 or 2029, because it's such a complicated issue and there's so many stakeholders involved that it's kind of a little hard to imagine that it's going to become completely resolved within the next year. And in this country as well, there's a lot of calls, and I don't know how successful these are going to be. There are a lot of calls to put moratoriums on both the building out of new data centers, because
Mhm.
those are obviously very controversial. They use a lot of power, they use a lot of water, and also just on AI development in general. And I'm not sure how a national moratorium on AI development would even work because you can't stop individual researchers from continuing to do their work. I
Mhm.
don't know what you would have inspectors go into OpenAI's labs or Claude's labs and make sure they're not up to anything. And then you have China, and there's no reason that China is going to sign on to that kind of an agreement as well, because they're doing really well with, they're definitely in the running in the AI race, and they're producing a lot of very valuable open models, which a lot of American companies aren't. And so I think the whole field right now, it's really very much a wild west.
Mhm.
We don't really know where all of the dust is going to settle. It's kind of like the very early days of the web and the internet, when the idea of using the web to advertise was seen as just an awful, awful idea. And the first person that did it got a lot of criticism. And of
Mhm.
course, now, I mean, that seems ridiculous.
Yeah.
Search engines were controversial because of privacy concerns. All of these things, looking back on them, and I think we're going to find that a lot of probably it's going to be more laissez-faire, and a lot of the things that we worry about now we'll look back at and say, God, what were we even thinking about? Because look at how far we've come just in terms of like social media didn't exist a little over 20 years ago.
Yes.
And it's become so fully integrated into our lives.
Mhm.
And there are certainly very strong arguments to be made for regulating it, but that never really came to pass. And now it's kind of too late. I mean, there's really no clear set of steps that you could put into play to regulate social
Mhm.
media. So we're kind of, for good or bad, stuck with it the way it is. So I think it's probably going to be less something planned out and more sort of a whole bunch of different little ad hoc things come together and we figure out some sort of compromise, but probably no one is going to be happy because no one ever is happy with, a good compromise.
Mhm. It's just amazing. So, can you explain? I want you to explain like a little bit of the complexity of AI because most people just think of it like as a computer. You go and put information in, and it researches and spits out information. And the
Right.
one thing I came across, I believe you was given an example of, I think, a 1958 experiment where they were talking to kids and made up a word. And then that particular word, because they said there were two of them, the kids naturally pluralized it based
Yeah.
off the language
Yeah.
and how that relates to AI and the way that
Yeah.
it arrives at its
Right.
decision.
Well, so that's out of a sort of area of more psycholinguistic, psychological, cognitive psychology research. And that basically is an area that I'm interested in, which has to do with trying to figure out to what extent these computer models are similar to humans when they use language. And there's a lot
Mhm.
of ways in which they're completely not like humans at all. And I think that's an important thing to keep in mind because people think that they're alive, they're human, they're talking to them. But if you break down what they're doing, in some ways, it's incredibly simple compared to how humans process information and process
Mhm.
language. And one point that I always think is just fascinating is when you look at the amount of energy that a human brain needs, it's like a light bulb or something tiny like that
Mhm.
compared to the huge amounts of energy that one of these queries requires in order to process. So right there, that tells us that something's not the same about these
Mhm.
two processes because whatever we're doing can be done with much less energy consumption than the method that we're using now for, algorithms in the computer. So to your point about the wugs, so the what you were talking about is that way back in the day, they wanted to see how children acquired rules like the plural is a dash s, right? So you would give someone a kid a new, like a made up word, a wug, and you would say, here's two of them. What do you have? And they would say two wugs. And the idea of that was that they had generalized a rule that to make a plural, you add an S to a word. And that the point is that that rule applied to things that you had never seen before. And that kind of is the basis for a lot of linguistic theory, because you obviously have to have some system that lets you introduce new words into the child's vocabulary and not have them be completely confused. And the same was done. There was a lot of work done with the past tense as well. And what you see in children is very interesting. What you see in children is that they learn the irregular past tense, like went, quite satisfactorily. But then they use when they learn the dash ed for the regular, sometimes they overcorrect and they start saying goed, and then they go and say went again. And many people have run these experiments, and I've run them myself. I wanted to see, did the machine show the same kind of rule-based learning that humans seem to have? And it doesn't. It actually does not show the same pattern at all. And what happens is that it kind of learns that a dash ed is what you put at the end of a past tense when you have a new word, but it doesn't always learn that the way children do. And a lot of it has to do with just how frequent the input is to the system. So if it has lots of goes and wents and goes, then it learns that very well. And whether or not it's really learning a rule, or it's just learning because it heard this before and it's not generalizing, but it's just using its own memory. So I think that's probably some of the experiments that you're talking about. And they're pretty central to the whole question of how similar these systems are to human language processing, and the degree to which they can tell us something about human language processing.
Love it. You have a podcast that you do.
Yeah.
You talking about the AI, the black box, if I'm not mistaken.
Inside the black box.
Inside the black box.
Yeah, I have a Substack, and I also just sort of put it into a podcast form as well. That's right.
What made you want to use that method of delivery for the information? And to anybody who wants to learn more about it, what would they get out of it, or they can expect to learn?
Well, I've talked to people that read the sub or that listen to the podcast, and I think that there are a lot of people out there who are experts in their own fields. So doctors, lawyers, engineers, people like that, and who are fascinated by AI, but don't really understand much about the nuts and bolts of how it works. And so what I wanted to do, and what I try to do, is to pick a topic every week that's kind of a good explanation of some little aspect. So we were talking about the past tense. Last week I posted some experiments that I had done looking at learning of the past tense in AI systems, and how that compares and contrasts to what you see with kids, and what that can tell you about what's going on inside those systems. So I think that in the end, people are really fascinated by these systems, but what surprises them, and what I kind of focus on in Inside the Black Box on Substack and the podcast, is that even the people that created them do not fully understand how it is that they arrive at the solutions that they arrive at. And there's a whole field called mechanistic interpretability that aims to understand and the reason for that is simply that these systems have literally billions and billions of parameters. I mean, they have huge numbers of numbers, really large vectors being processed by these chips, by these GPUs. And so when you have a solution space that's that large, it's very difficult unless everything is crisp and rule-based, which we don't think it is, it's very difficult to figure out exactly how it's learning, because what these systems do is you give them the answer and then you see if they come up with the answer, and then if they don't, you adjust them a little bit, and you just keep doing that repeatedly for literally trillions, sometimes trillions of iterations, until when you put something in at the other end, you get something out and it makes sense. But what's going on in that in between with all those numbers is extremely complicated and very difficult to really fathom, I think. And so what I do in Inside the Black Box is try to talk a little bit about, different topics in there and maybe make it a little bit less mysterious for people and a little less scary.
I love that. So for everybody out there, they want to learn more, where would you like them to go? And then also, what's like the number one misnomer that people will have about AI?
Well, so you can see the Substack is insidetheblackbox.ai, and I also have an app called yourvoicecraft.ai, which you can go to and get a beta for, and that will allow you to basically train a local model like what we were talking about to speak in your own voice, in your written voice. As far as the things that I see people wrong about, I guess you could say, about AI, I think it's not something to be scared of. There's a lot of very anti-AI sentiment, and I live in a kind of bubble where everyone thinks AI is great, and I have to keep reminding myself that there are a lot of people out there that don't think that AI is great. They're afraid it'll take away their jobs, which, is an issue we've already discussed. They're afraid that it will somehow take over the world, which is pretty unlikely. And there are people who I think that they're actually in some sense alive, and it's, an actual entity that you're talking to. And that's just not the case. You're dealing with a computer. It's all ones and zeros. You're putting information into a huge register or stack of computing elements, and you're getting something out. That's nothing like what the human brain does. It's much more complicated. Neurons are just these completely mysterious computational elements that do a lot more than what a computer does, and with a lot less power, as we've discussed. So I would say, my takeaways are: don't be scared, learn it, actually get to know the strengths and weaknesses of it. When you go in and start playing with it and trying to get responses from it, you begin to get a sort of sense of its personality. I don't like to say personality, but I'll say personality because it's not a human. But it's sort of personality and the sorts of ways that it responds to the things that you say. And I think that helps to demystify it and make it a lot less scary for a lot of people. So that would be my take home.
Okay. But Dr. Blackwell, I appreciate your time and you giving
thanks.
me,
I enjoyed it.
Inside perspective to this, which I've learned some more things today, and just even how to just look at AI. And I'm glad that I've been prompting pretty
I like
correctly.
your prompt. The way you've been prompting is very good. That's what I do. So
So I'm on the right path. I like that.
On the right path. Absolutely.
Everybody out there, y'all can go check out Inside the Black Box podcast. I'll have it all description and linked in the show. And then also, you said you're on Substack as well.
That the Inside the Black Box.ai is Substack, but if you do Inside the Black Box, you'll also, if you do a podcast search, you'll find it as a podcast as well on Apple and Spotify.
And y'all can go and check it out. If you want to learn more, you got questions, things of that nature, get up Dr. Blackwell. I'm sure he would respond whenever he has free time.
Absolutely. Substack actually has a mailing system, so you can DM me if you want.
That's what's up. So you got a system in place for everything.
Yeah, that's right. I try to.
I love it. Yeah, I can learn how to be more efficient out here using AI. I'm your host, Andreas. The Bankedoutt Radio Show. This has been Music and Business Talk and covering, AI.
When I started my first independent record label, I was folding shirts at Old Navy, slipping handmade compilation CDs straight into customers' shopping bags just to secure my first sales. I had zero budget, but I had an infinite drive. But today, I see so many solopreneurs running on social media treadmills, posting content for free, and praying an algorithm smiles on them. That's not a business plan. That's hope marketing. If you don't pay to advertise and build search engine infrastructure, you are paying with your manual labor hours instead. Stop building on rented land. I put my entire 10-year field manual on PayHip called I Can Do Bad All By Myself to show you exactly how to build a sovereign empire you own outright. Comment the word lean below and I will instantly DM you the link to grab your copy for $19.99.